to come visit, you name it, they were there for. If I said I need, they were there. If I, just to come visit and sit with me and see if I needed anything, it was amazing. And I think sometimes when you have something like this, sometimes you don't appreciate all the help that you get, because you still think that you can do it by yourself, but you can't. Sometimes you just need somebody to extend that hand and say, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere, and whatever you need, let me help you. And that was one of the hardest lessons for me, because I'm so independent, and I don't ask for very much, but I'm always there to give to others, and I got what I give. I learned very quickly in January of 2018 that it can come back, and it did. I went to have a CT scan, and it came back showing that I had a 9-centimeter mass, which turned out to be ovarian cancer. The tumor was ovarian. When I got the news, I was sitting in my car. I had just finished water aerobics, and my phone rang, and Dr. Vinitha gave me the news. I sat in the car for 30 minutes and couldn't move. I couldn't cry. I just was motionless, and I didn't even realize that I was just sitting there. I was sitting there, and I was in such a state of disbelief that I was going to have to go through this again. And I'm not really sure of what was going to happen, but I was going to have to go through it again. I was back in Miami again to see Dr. Lambro, and he discussed everything with me. And a couple days later, I was having surgery to have this tumor taken out. This time, I understood things a little bit better once they were explained to me that this can come back again, and I have to stress that is prevention, having checkups once you have cancer, to make sure that you do get your checkups, that you do get your blood tests done, because it was imperative for me. I am not your typical, as my doctors tell me, I am not your typical patient. I react to things differently. So it was imperative that I have my checkups, and this is what the result was. This time, chemo was a lot different for me, and it was more difficult. I had a chemo wash during the surgery, which was to help prevent the tumors from coming back. So it was almost like I already had a double dose before I started. So I was experiencing a lot of things earlier this time. My reaction to the carboplatin, I broke out in hives, and so it happened every single time, which was something that didn't happen before. So it was a little bit more difficult the second time around, and it was a little bit more frustrating for me. But once again, I had really good doctors that were explaining everything, and I had friends that were there to help, and my job, people understood, and they wanted to know how I was doing, but there was no pressure at all. The only thing that they said was, please get well. The Cancer Society was a tremendous help. And initially, I didn't want to go to the Cancer Society, and it wasn't because it was, the Cancer Society. No, it had nothing to do with that. I just thought that, did I really need them? There might be people that are sicker than I am that may need help. But my friend Vanessa kept encouraging me, please go. I had another friend, Irving. He was like, hey, I heard them on the radio. Please go and just talk to them. So I went to talk to them. And I found out that besides them being good listeners, that there was things that they offered that could help. There was information that they gave me. So I sat there and talked to Jennifer for about 2 hours that day. And she set me up and she talked to me about, she listened to my story, and it was a good experience. They were there through the first set of cancer and they were there for the second. And they've been there to help me when I've had to go back and forth with hotels and such. Now it's a little bit easier because it's covered by my insurance, but still they are there. They're still there to help with advice. And now I am trying to help give back to them. And that's a wonderful thing. What I learned was don't be afraid to reach out again and get help where you can. And they were a tremendous source of help and a tremendous source of support. And they always are. When you walk in the door, they're always smiling and always, how can I help you? They are true to their word about where the money goes. It goes to help those that need it. And I can't say enough about them. I can't say enough about the doctors that I have. As you know, that if you do have cancer or any kind of treatment that's long-term, your doctors are very important to you. They're your source of information and they are your source of comfort at times. I can't say enough about Dr. Vinitha Benoy, Dr. Richens, Dr. Lawrence. At Miami Cancer Institute, Dr. Nicholas Lambro and his team. If there's one thing that I've learned through this journey, that is the importance of getting checkups. It could save your life. So don't think that, it's a daily aches and pains, or, oh my gosh, it'll go away. It may not go away. It takes a phone call to call your doctor to say, hey, I'm having a problem, or hey, I have a pain. Can I come in and get it checked? It is important. Trust me, it is important. So make sure you get your checkups.
The forensics lab role at the HSA is that we offer paternity testing, we offer DNA, which is part of the DNA services. We offer drug testing, so when individuals come for pre-employment drug screening, they come here. We also offer services for drug rehabilitation for clients, and we have other services which include clients such as the RCIPS and CBC, Customs Border Control, and the judiciary, so the courts. It's important for Cayman to have a forensics lab because of the services I just mentioned, but also in more recent events with the need for COVID testing, we already had the majority of the equipment required, so that we just had to train lab personnel to do the protocols required for the COVID PCR testing. So once the pandemic hit us last year, we weren't scrambling to send any samples overseas or anything like that. We were able to provide testing on island, and we've worked it so that you can get your PCR test done within 24 hours. So you no longer, you didn't have to worry about sending them overseas, having a long wait time or anything like that. And also, we can also extend our services to other jurisdictions within the Caribbean. We provide DNA testing services for cases that come from Belize. We can provide to other Caribbean islands that don't have a functioning forensics DNA lab. So being accredited and being within the hospital here in Cayman has pushed us very far ahead of the curve. So having the forensics lab here at the HSA is very beneficial to the average person, because when they come to do their regular, for example, government medical for their pre-employment, they just come down the hallway and they have their drug screening done down here, as well as, you know, x-rays and their blood work and so on. In addition to that, we can offer paternity testing, which before our lab was up and running, we had to send those overseas, which took probably up to a month, possibly, to get back. But we offer it within, you know, 2 to 3 weeks turnaround time. So that's very beneficial for patients or clients who are looking to have paternity done for, say, immigration purposes, and they're rushing to get that paperwork in. Also, because we offer drug chemistry, when it comes to any cases that come in for the RCIPS, they don't have to worry about sending any of that overseas. It is done here on island. Therefore, the judiciary system can tend to those cases in a speedily manner. In addition to what I just mentioned, it's also a cost savings to the patients and the clients that come in, because we offer it on island versus having it sent overseas. I was inspired by the forensic scientist that was here. His name was Dr. David Shadell. I came as a summer intern when I had just finished high school, not knowing anything about the department. It was pre-CSI Las Vegas type TV shows, and I was blown away by the lab work that we did here, they did here. It was so interesting, and I'm a hands-on type of person. I realized my passion was doing laboratory work, doing chemistry, doing DNA, like when I was in university. So it was always refreshing every morning coming into the lab, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And it's important for females to get into these roles, because no longer is it just thought of as only men can do this. We can all do this. If we put our minds to it, we can all do science. Coming here as a summer intern really opened up my eyes, and I really am an advocate for HSA summer internship program that they put on every year. We currently have had about 4 or 5 interns come through our lab just this summer, with 3 or more to come next week. And it's been a joy to see the Caymanians, the young adults, coming into our lab and learning and getting hands-on experience. And some of them have even said, wow, I never thought I would enjoy science, and now I'm rethinking what I'm going to go off to study. And it warms my heart to know that we are paving the way for them to know that there are other fields of interest within the hospital. It's not just doctors and nurses, but there are other departments here, and it is a great internship program that they put on. And I look forward to meeting more interns and hoping to inspire them to come back home to Cayman and work within the HSA.
So I decided to become a molecular biologist because, that was my undergraduate degree that I was studying at the time, and I was flipping between doing that and law. But I had a lot of friends who were in medicine, and I had kind of medical journey, and one of the things that I noticed was that genetics sort of played an understated role in medicine. And so I decided to investigate that a little bit more, because I figured if genetics is the cause for so many diseases, why doesn't it feature as a bigger part of medical care? And so when I sort of went and met people who are doing that sort of work, where they're intersecting genetics into healthcare, I realized that this is a big issue at the forefront of molecular biology, and it was very exciting. And so I got pulled into that direction and decided like that's what I wanted to do. So my role in the lab is I'm the leader of the genome sequencing project at HSA. So essentially we have two machines donated by the R3 Foundation, and that's the Illumina MySeq to my left, and then the Oxford Nanopore MinION. And the primary purpose of these machines is to determine the strains, the variants of COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2, and then inform public health and the CMO. And then the sort of secondary and tertiary purposes of the machine are for public health initiatives, so breast cancer screening, newborn screening, and then eventually things like coral research and so on. So my role is to develop the protocols and the techniques for being able to perform those services locally. So I've kind of used my primary role here to train young Caymanians. So in the last, I'd say 2 months, I've trained 5, and we're currently training a couple more, because I feel like molecular science, life sciences in general, are very small part of the kind of scope of the Cayman Islands at the moment, and a lot of people don't consider those career paths in Cayman. So being able to at least highlight that the lab is here and that we're doing very advanced techniques and you can make a career out of this sort of work, I think is a primary purpose I found in this role. So my average day would be, there are kind of 2 answers to this. One is that you have a sort of normal 9 to 5, which happens occasionally, and then the other is I'd come into the lab, perform the PCR COVID testing with my colleagues, and then we would prepare for batching the next week of sequencing. So every week we perform sequencing runs, and we have to determine which samples to put on which batch. Basically, it's a process of organization, but also a bit of an investigative process, because you have to have reasons for sequencing certain things. Otherwise, the value of it may not be as useful as sequencing other viral samples. So in terms of doing that, and then from the previous run, I analyze the data and put that into a results spreadsheet and send that to public health and the CMO. The other aspect of my work throughout the day is to develop standard operating procedures for new testing services we're trying to get online. So the breast cancer sequencing and the coral sequencing in particular. And that takes a lot of kind of research and discussion with other collaborating labs in other parts of the world to see what would work best here for what we're trying to do. It's important to have Caymanians in these types of careers because at the moment there's a very limited scope for the career paths that a lot of Caymanians can look to get into. And so it's very competitive because we also bring in expertise around the world at that level. And so being able to compete on a world stage in your own country is a very daunting task. And for at least from Cayman's perspective, if we were able to expand life sciences into potentially another industry, then that would give Caymanians another avenue in terms of searching for their careers. It also allowed them to go and get this, have the skills here to go overseas and get careers in other labs. So it opens the door for a lot of potential career pathways, really. I'm not sure if it could be understated, really, the importance, because if we didn't have the ability to test for the virus or do so in a very fast turnaround time, then our ability to tackle and understand the spread of the virus throughout the island would just be very, very poor. And so having that sort of insight into the spread and being able to contact trace and determine if someone's positive or negative within a few hours has allowed public health and government to have the sort of amazing responses that we've seen, so that we can all kind of more or less resume a normal life over the last year. So the capability of the lab to meet those challenges has enabled us to have, you know, the kind of situation we're in right now. And that's the whole idea of the genome sequencing, is that in the event of certain things happening, right, we have another level of reassurance to be able to determine the movement of the virus between individuals that are positive, if it should ever happen, and also be able to make effective policy changes based on the kind of variants we're seeing being spread. You know, the nature of that type of spread. Is it something that's happening at a faster rate than we've seen before? Is it something that's breaking through vaccine efficacy? Those things, and that will guide policies with respect to bringing people here and allowing free movement. So it's really critical to have a good lab setup and an adaptive lab response when it comes to pandemics and public health screening in general.
I knew I wanted to have a career in this field because I knew it would be a field that would allow me to use a lot of the skills that I learned during my studies, while also allowing me to expand my skill set by learning new skills in the field of forensics. And while also being able to interact with and work with members of my community, and really just exploring the career options that are available in the forensics field and figuring out what it is I really want to do. I honestly love seeing Caymanian women in the field of science. I feel like science especially was such a male-dominated industry, and I really love being able to see women, but especially Caymanian women, because for a long time it was a lot of men and also non-Caymanian men that were dominating the science field here in Cayman. So it's really empowering and really special to see Caymanian women pursuing more careers in STEM. I would say I haven't been working here long, but this work has definitely taken me out of my comfort zone, but in a really good way. I think I was used to working in a lab, you know, with test tubes and not really interacting with people as much, but now there's a lot more patient contact in what I do, and I think it has really helped me open my eyes, and it's something that I realized that I actually really enjoy doing. So I definitely say it did take me out of my comfort zone, but in a really great way. I would really encourage more people to consider a career in forensics. I think it's a field that's often overlooked. Even when people do pursue STEM careers, I think it's a field that a lot of people would be very interested in. And again, it's really rewarding and fulfilling to be able to interact with members of your community and to help out.
Thank you for watching GIS Spotlight. For more info, visit us on www.gis.gov.ky. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Flickr, Twitter, and YouTube. This is a production of GIS Marketing and Communications.
I like TV. I love the Hallmark Channel. And I love to watch the Hallmark Christmas movies. I love to travel. I've been to Greece, I've been to Russia, I've been to China, to Denmark, and you name it. I've been to different places around the world. I love the movies. It's always my escape. I can go to one movie and then back-to-back movies in the theater. I have no problem. Just grab a popcorn and I'm good to go. But the thing I'm most proud of, and the thing that took the most courage, is to be a cancer survivor. And here's my story. September 2016, I was out And all of a sudden I stopped. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The person that was with me, they didn't know what to do. So I finally got to a point where they could take me to the emergency room. They put me on a nebulizer and sent me home because they believed it was the onset of asthma. I came home. I felt better for a little bit. I came back, and I went back because I started having the same issues all over again. Couldn't breathe. I had gone to church and I was sitting, I parked near the church. I walked about 10 feet and I was so out of breath, I had to sit down and I couldn't move. And I grabbed a friend and I said, I'm going back to the emergency room. I just wanted you to know that. I got to the emergency room, different doctor, different questions. And the next thing I know, I was being CT scans, blood tests, you name it. 4 hours later, the doctor came in and said, you have blood clots and this is an emergency. The doctor says you have 2 blood clots in your lungs and you have a large mass, and we don't know what the large mass is. So I was admitted immediately to the hospital, and they started me on IVs and blood thinners and all the rest of it. I saw another doctor the next day, and that doctor was Dr. Lawrence. And she comes in and she said, I don't want to alarm you. You don't have 2 blood clots, you have 4 blood clots and a large mass. I started to get better, a little better, as they were still running tests and everything. But then all of a sudden I was kind of taking a turn for the worst. And she knew that the doctors here couldn't do what they needed to do. So she had me airlifted to South Miami Hospital, where I met with another team of doctors. And of course, I was in no condition at that point to even have surgery yet, because surgery was inevitable because of the mass. And also because it was critical. What made it even more critical was because of the blood clots. They could not wait for the blood clots to subside before they could do the surgery, because that was part of the problem. The mass was causing the blood clots. So after about 10 days, I had the surgery. And out of that came endometrial and ovarian cancer, stage 1. The last thing that I ever thought out of all of this, that somebody was going to tell me that I had cancer. But you know, God is good. He is really good, because the whole time I had tremendous doctors. And I have to say a huge thank you to Dr. Nicholas Lambro, because he led that team and he didn't give up on me, and still hasn't. And back here, I still had Dr. Lawrence, and I would be introduced very shortly to Dr. Vinitha Benoy, who would be the oncologist back here for my chemo. So I had to have chemo. I had 6 treatments of chemo every 3 weeks. And it wasn't easy, but it wasn't really difficult. And I know people have different reactions to chemo. Mine wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I had to do a lot of reading because I didn't understand the medication. I didn't understand the procedures. I was scared to death. I really was scared to death. I didn't know anything. I was going in, they were talking needles. I wasn't even sure where the port, how they were going to use the port. And I'm sure these are all questions that people ask when these things happen. Where does the port go? How do they put the needle in, and where's the medicine go? But all those questions were quickly answered on my first visit to Health City for my chemo. I also found that I had an enormous amount of support. The friends that I consider family, and others were there to give rides, to come visit, you name it, they were there for. If I said I need, they were there. If I, just to come visit and sit with me and see if I needed anything, it was amazing. And I think sometimes when you have something like this, sometimes you don't appreciate all the help that you get, because you still think that you can do it by yourself, but you can't. Sometimes you just need somebody to extend that hand and say, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere, and whatever you need, let me help you. And that was one of the hardest lessons for me, because I'm so independent, and I don't ask for very much, but I'm always there to give to others, and I got what I give. I learned very quickly in January of 2018 that it can come back, and it did. I went to have a CT scan, and it came back showing that I had a 9-centimeter mass, which turned out to be ovarian cancer. The tumor was ovarian. When I got the news, I was sitting in my car. I had just finished water aerobics, and my phone rang, and Dr. Vinitha gave me the news. I sat in the car for 30 minutes and couldn't move. I couldn't cry. I just was motionless, and I didn't even realize that I was just sitting there. I was sitting there, and I was in such a state of disbelief that I was going to have to go through this again. And I'm not really sure of what was going to happen, but I was going to have to go through it again. I was back in Miami again to see Dr. Lambro, and he discussed everything with me, and a couple days later, I was having surgery to have this tumor taken out. This time, I understood things a little bit better once they were explained to me that this can come back again, and and I have to stress, that is prevention, having checkups once you have cancer, to make sure that you do get your checkups, that you do get your blood tests done, because it was imperative for me. I am not your typical, as my doctors tell me, I am not your typical patient. I react to things differently. So it was imperative that I have my checkups, and this is what the result was. This time, chemo was a lot different for me, and it was more difficult. I had a chemo wash during the surgery, which was to help prevent the tumors from coming back. So it was almost like I already had a double dose before I started. So I was experiencing a lot of things earlier this time. My reaction to the carboplatin, I broke out in hives, and so it happened every single time, which was something that didn't happen before. So it was a little bit more difficult the second time around, and it was a little bit more frustrating for me. But once again, I had really good doctors that were explaining everything, and I had friends that were there to help, and my job, people understood, and they wanted to know how I was doing, but there was no pressure at all. The only thing that they said was, please get well. The Cancer Society was a tremendous help. And initially, I didn't want to go to the Cancer Society, and it wasn't because it was, the Cancer Society. No, it had nothing to do with that. I just thought that, did I really need them? There might be people that are sicker than I am that may need help. But my friend Vanessa kept encouraging me, please go. I had another friend, Irving. He was like, hey, I heard them on the radio. Please go and just talk to them. So I went to talk to them. And I found out that besides them being good listeners, that there was things that they offered that could help. There was information that they gave me. So I sat there and talked to Jennifer for about 2 hours that day. And she set me up and she talked to me about, she listened to my story, and it was a good experience. They were there through the first set of cancer and they were there for the second. And they've been there to help me when I've had to go back and forth with hotels and such. Now it's a little bit easier because it isn't covered by my insurance, but still they are there. They're still there to help with advice. And now I am trying to help give back to them. And that's a wonderful thing. What I learned was don't be afraid to reach out again and get help where you can. And they were a tremendous source of help and a tremendous source of support. And they always are. When you walk in the door, they're always smiling and always, how can I help you? They are true to their word about where the money goes. It goes to help those that need it. And I can't say enough about them. I can't say enough about the doctors that I have. As you know, that if you do have cancer or any kind of treatment that's long-term, your doctors are very important to you. They're your source of information and they are your source of comfort at times. I can't say enough about Dr. Vinitha Benoy, Dr. Richens, Dr. Lawrence. At Miami Cancer Institute, Dr. Nicholas Lambro and his team. If there's one thing that I've learned through this journey, that is the importance of getting checkups. It could save your life. So don't think that, it's a daily aches and pains, or, oh my gosh, it'll go away. It may not go away. It takes a phone call to call your doctor to say, hey, I'm having a problem, or hey, I have a pain. Can I come in and get it checked? It is important. Trust me, it is important. So make sure you get your checkups.
Beginning the 10th of October, residents across the Cayman Islands will be invited to participate in the 2021 census. What is the census? Simply put, the census is a head count of every person living in the Cayman Islands. The population count and data are protected and authorized by the Statistics Act. The information is confidential and cannot be shared with any law enforcement agencies. Your response helps guide business, social, and economic planning for the future of our islands. The 2021 census will inform decisions on how millions of dollars are allocated for roads, schools, hospitals and healthcare clinics, fire, emergency response services, and other programs. Census enumerators will visit your household, ask a few questions like how many people live in your house, including their age and sex. Every person counts, no matter who you are or where you live. So have your say in the 2021 census.
It's the year 1886 in the Cayman Islands. A population of only 1,000 people. The island's only industry is the sea. It's in this year, on November 16th, that Cayman's most prolific songwriter was born, Leela MacTaggart.
Our legend, our genius, our writer.
This great teacher, this great author, she was an innovator and was ahead of her time.
She was a prolific songwriter.
And boy, could she play that guitar. And could she sing.
Leela's father, William, was a Christian minister born in Cayman in 1863 and was of Scottish Jamaican descent. His childhood sweetheart was Emily Ann, who would become his wife and the mother of Leela. Taken from her diary, Leela says about her father.
He had a fine voice and loved to sing by note. He had a violin which he played when the family gathered in the parlour to enjoy the evening together.
Leela says about her mother.
She was so faithful, self-sacrificing, tender and loving, so versatile and charming.
Leela says about herself.
The little girl was christened and brought up in the nurture of the Lord Jesus Christ, and from her earliest infancy loved her Saviour and gave her heart to him.
She was bright, creative, and multi-talented.
She was very, very artistic, and she just looked the part.
She played the accordion, the harmonica, the piano, the organ, the ukulele, the guitar, and the mandolin.
She composed all her songs on her own, and she superseded all her elders.
She never hesitated to pour out her soul in song. She kept up her studies and practiced.
She wanted to be a songwriter. She wanted to be a poet.
Leela was full of expression, and her family encouraged her interest in music. She was always writing, composing, and singing. In 1914, Leela met Bentley Ross, a native of Honduras. 6 weeks later, they were married.
I think he talked Spanish and worked with the boats as supercargo. And
I think he was a seaman or a merchant marine,
and he traded between Honduras, Cayman, and Cuba.
Before long, Leela and her husband moved to Honduras.
After 7 months, she returned to Cayman. On November the 12th, her baby girl was born, a beautiful child who everyone loved and admired.
A few years later, Leela had another child, this time a boy. It's said that it was during this time period that she wrote the classic song Beloved Isle Cayman.
It was in 1932, before the hurricane hit Cayman, that she wrote the Cayman national song, Beloved Isle Cayman. Bentley was very proud of it and had it copyrighted in Washington. They were simply glad of its popularity and sent it to various radio stations where it was put on their programs. Copies were sent to the schools and the children were taught to sing it.
A hauntingly beautiful song, it would one day become the national song of the Cayman Islands.
And this one is a most beautiful anthem. I think it's the most beautiful one I've ever heard, quite frankly. The words and music tell us a lot about Miss Leela's persona, with her Creator's glory reflected everywhere. In other words, she saw God in everything when she looked around the island. The breezes, the ocean, the birds, everything. She saw God in them.
You read her poems and all you can see is her view of things as being beautiful.
Yeah.
That song captured the essence of who we are as a people. It's home. That's what it all boils down to.
5 years later, in 1937, Leela's husband, Bentley Ross, traveled to Cuba for business. On the night of Christmas Eve, Bentley was tragically killed in a car accident. Only 39 years old and a mother of 2, Leela was now a widow.
And the heavy clouds of grief enveloped Leela, and it seemed she would go under. God in His wonderful love sent her a dream or a vision in the early hours one morning. she thought that she stepped into the old home and called out, "Who was it who rung the bell and said, 'Be happy'?" And one robed in silvery whiteness took her and folded her to his bosom and said, "'Tis Jesus, 'tis Jesus." She awoke and put her house in order, and from that day determined to make home happy and comfortable for her children.
Leela moved back permanently to the Cayman Islands. She settled back into Georgetown and got involved in the community.
I lived in town then, and I went to work in with a lady, Leela Ross. I worked with her in the kitchen.
A multi-talented woman, she eventually became the head librarian of the Georgetown Library. In a time when education was not valued and young men were expected to go to sea and send money home, Leela freely shared knowledge with those around her.
Reading was my thing. And of course, that didn't go down well. And so I took refuge in the library. And that is when I met Miss Leela Ross. Remember, it came out as a segregated society. And for a white woman, taking interest in a colored boy from Mayor Street was extraordinary.
Well, I first met Miss Leela when I was 12 years old. I came to Georgetown to go to Cayman High School. And she came and she looked out of the window, and I always remember the expression on her face. And she looked out of the window and she says, "Hey, dearie, you're new? This is the library." I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she says, "You see all of these books here?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "I can lend them to you, and you can read them all."
Every time we went to the library, she showed us what to read.
Day after day, month after month, year after year. I would spend hours there.
She gave private music lessons.
You play the guitar as well?
Miss Leela Ross was teaching me to pick the guitar. She used to play it so much.
And she was always at her plays at school. You know, she was a very supportive person and very involved in the community.
She had the kindest, sweetest smile.
I always remember her like a twinkle in her eyes.
This is how she always spoke. She said, "Son, you have a good mind, you know." She said, "You ought to try to develop that."
She was a friendly person. And she was real. She wasn't make-believe.
Her presence was felt in the community because she was involved in pretty much every aspect of our lives. She was a big person.
I'm lonesome and unhappy, for mosquitoes make me sore.
For everyone I kill, I find a million more.
If you were here beside me, I don't think I should care.
For you could kill mosquitoes and still caress me there. Oh, sure, I get a little love note in there, boy.
Over the years, Leela established herself as a well-known and prominent woman in Georgetown.
Women did not get the right to vote until 1959, but they did not vote until 1962. And in 1959, Leela was one of those persons who signed this. This is her name, Leela E. Shire. After this push, they removed the Sex Disqualification Act. Miss Leela was not just a writer. She was part of the political process.
But despite being involved in various community activities, her main love was always music.
She was always in demand as an entertainer.
People must forget that. She was the one producing the concerts in those days.
People would come and they would play and sing, or they would recite poetry or whatever, and she always used her own.
She wrote on every minutiae of things in the Cayman Islands.
That she wrote topical songs. If there's any special functions in the town hall, she would write a song about that.
A dedicated Christian, Leela was a member of the Presbyterian Church her whole life.
She was also the choir leader in the Presbyterian Church, or the Amsa Memorial Church as you know it now. And was very involved in the life of the church.
She was an organist, Sunday school teacher.
I remember Leela singing in the choir. When she wasn't pounding on the organ, she was up there singing.
Really, her whole life was around church.
She never missed church. Always dressed up with her jewelry and her lipstick, and always beautiful. She had beautiful curly hair.
Time went on, and Leela got older. During this late period in her life, she would find love again.
When Samuel Shire, a Canadian who also had lost his dear partner and was lonely as she, met her, it seemed as if it was ordained so, and they were married.
That's how he used to laugh.
Carried a cane, a black cane, bushy mustache.
You remember it was just after the war of all those calamities, so she was able to sit quietly in the library here.
I came as a visitor.
And that's how he met her. I guess he spent a lot of time visiting with her.
And he hooked it up with Aunt Leela, boy.
Loving to bloom.
Her dear husband claimed that she made life sweet, musical, peaceful and happy by her companionship and devotion.
He certainly did really well for grandmother. She dearly loved him. They seemed to have had a fantastic marriage.
Oh yeah, they had a good life together. And they loved each other.
And of course, when she married Mr. Shire, he took her on trips, took her up to Canada.
I traveled a lot, and she always wanted to come back to Cayman.
Then, tragedy would strike again. Mr. Shire would die while going for his evening swim.
His last words to me, "I am going for a swim in Coral Bay. I'll be back soon, dear." He was brought back at 9:30 in his coffin, and all my soul was torn within me, gone without a goodbye in the best of health. But though from out the bourne of time and space the floods may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar.
Now widowed twice and in the twilight of her life, Leela moved to her son Benny's house on the ocean on North Church Street.
I remember when we were school children and went to always past the house every day. A lot of times she was playing a guitar, or she would be tuning up and composing, looking out over the water.
In 1968, Leela's health began to decline rapidly.
As the days went by, she got weaker. She didn't write too much after that.
Leela's footsteps are growing feeble, once so fearless and bold. As she feels the shadow of the evening of her life lengthening, she wonders, has the world been any sweeter for anyone through her life?
I guess they didn't realize she was so low in health at the time. And I was just holding her hand, and she started to breathe real deeply, and I thought, oh, something is happening to her. I said, she's dead. She's dead, Robert.
I heard the voice of Jesus say, why wait for weary years? Come now to me, my child, and I will always calm your fears. I came to Jesus in my glad and happy, glorious youth. I found in him a lasting joy, a well of life and truth.
Leela died on September 26, 1968. Throughout the course of her life, she wrote hundreds of songs, many of which are still sung by Caymanians today.
Miss Leela was really a child of God and who loved the things of God and who was interested in her community and all the things that really matter in life.
She was a gentle old soul.
That smile, I always remember her smile.
I don't think I ever saw her that she didn't smile and have something nice to say.
She was just a lovely, lovely person.
She was the first inspiration for learning and for truth. She's one of the greatest Caymanian women.
I would say she was one of the most genuinely pure Christian ladies. That was really a genius, and probably one of the most humble people I've ever known.
Our hero, our phenomenal woman.
Leila's contribution to our society was far-reaching and was primarily channeled through her music. Music was her life, and it was through music that she imparted herself and shared the beauty of Cayman to the world. In 2016, Leila's granddaughter Lisa arranged for a symphony orchestra to perform and record Leila's classic song, Beloved Isle Cayman. What you are hearing now is that recording. This symphonic recording is a fitting achievement for Cayman's most famous song by our most famous musician, Leila MacTaggart Ross Shire.
Before that moment was this recruitment process. I think one of the things to note in our public service and our civil service, we don't get promoted. So I think I've worked really hard, and I certainly believe that I earned the post, but not only do I earn it because of my history of effort and deliverables in the service, but it was a really rigorous recruitment process. There was psychometric testing, there was an interview panel that included people from the private sector. But when I received the call, I think it was almost one of those things where you don't quite believe it. And I think it took a little while for it to be really real. And even on May 1st, when I took up the post, it still wasn't quite real. And I think it's only really gotten real in the past few weeks as I get closer to leaving. And it's like, this is really happening. And I think, you know what, for a while I was waiting for somebody to say, no, we're just joking. Or, oh, we've changed our mind, or something has happened, or it's not going to happen again. And you're kind of waiting for, please don't let the other shoe drop, But so excited, just really honored that I get to represent my country and to be an ambassador in another country. I think the opportunity to really represent my government overseas. I've been spending quite a bit of time over the past weeks meeting with senior officials in government as well as in the private sector. And the invitation to the government is, the London office is an extension of the Cayman Islands government in the UK. We're an extension of every ministry, of every portfolio. And so the invitation that I've extended in the meetings is, how can we assist your ministry? How can we assist the government? How can we contribute to delivering the broad outcomes of the government, the priorities of our political leadership? And so those are the conversations we've been having, and I look forward on that side to be able to start delivering things that connect back here, that are meaningful over in the Cayman Islands. I think one of the advantages that I have is that I've spent this past 7+ years working across our government and our public sector. I've had the opportunity through my work with the Governor's Office and the Deputy Governor's Office to deliver projects that were of national importance, that impacted, and require the collaboration of multiple departments and ministries. So I have built relationships, professional relationships across our civil and our public service. And so I think bringing that to the London office is going to make a huge difference and a huge impact, and it'll connect those persons in London, I think, more closely with the Cayman Islands government in the Cayman Islands, because I'm able to be that bridge. And I think because of my wealth of knowledge, having worked in the civil service for many years, I'm able to really bring the heart of the civil service to London, and represent not just my country, but my civil service in that space. And then hopefully then, working with the other members of the team in London, be able to kind of bring a bit of home there and shake things up a bit, and just infuse that passion that we have in the Cayman Islands Civil Service. So I definitely want to make the London office seem more relevant. I think sometimes people don't quite know what the London office does. How does it connect? How is it useful? How is it value for money? How does it benefit the Cayman Islands government, the Cayman Islands as a whole? And so certainly I'm looking for opportunities to be able to demonstrate its relevance and to be able to deliver things that connect back to home, but that we can measure and demonstrate in doing this. This is how we've helped the Cayman Islands government, the Cayman Islands as a whole, exploring and looking for unique opportunities for the government, for the country, for businesses here, using social media. And really kind of looking at our communications. And that's one thing we're doing now, is looking at our communications and making sure that we are utilizing the opportunities and the different channels to its fullest capacity, but also being really careful about the messaging and what do we want to share and how do we want to share it, and making sure people know what we're doing in the UK. I think in terms of what a day looks like, I think since May 1st, when I took up the post, I've been delivering that work from here. And so, the day looks like meetings with key stakeholders. I'm a member, as a representative, a member of UKATA, the UK Overseas Territories Association. And within that group are representatives from each of the other OTs. So a lot of the work that's done on behalf of the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office in the OTs is done through UKATA. So I've been engaging with my UKATA colleagues, and through that work, we're able to advance agendas and important policy issues for the territories as a whole in the space in the UK. So really advocating for the Cayman Islands government through the engagements with stakeholders, through the work of UKATA, and then also, working with ministry. So, one of the things that has been asked is I've been meeting with various civil service, senior civil servants here, is, helping them to maintain relationships in the UK. So the Cayman Islands government, different delegations will travel a few times a year, but in between travel, relationships grow cold, they grow stale. And so using the London office to ensure that there are strong relations with our key stakeholders in London, both in the civil service, in Parliament, as well as in the private sector. And then where there's a change of people, that the London office is aware and builds relationships with the new people on the scene, so that when our delegations come, it's much easier to engage in that business space because you're engaging with people that are familiar with your government. I think in talking and speaking with people in the UK, I think what I will miss is the sun. I love to just be able to stand outside and you just feel the warmth of the sun. And what I understand is that the sun comes out sometimes in the UK, but when it comes out, you can't feel it. It just comes for show, as we say, but it don't do nothing to warm the soul. And so I think for me, it's that Caribbean sun that I'm going to miss the most. I think I'm just really grateful for this opportunity. I think, as Caymanians, we need to really look at making our mark on the world stage. The Cayman Islands has so much to offer globally, and we can compete globally. And so we need to think of ourselves individually in terms of how can we make a difference in the world, not just in our country, not just in the Caribbean, but globally. And I think for me, this is an opportunity for me as a civil servant, as a professional, to stand on the world stage and say, I am a Caymanian and I am here in the UK to represent, and to do that really well. And I really look forward to that opportunity.
Everyone, and welcome to today's press briefing. I'm Donna Bush. I'm so glad you could join us here today on our various channels, as well as live on Radio Cayman. We begin with a prayer from Pastor Torrance Bob.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father and our God, we thank you that as we prepare for this press briefing, that we can come to you. Please guide, O God, all of the presenters, all of the participants. We thank you for the relative normalcy that we have enjoyed here in the Cayman Islands during this global pandemic. We thank you, O God, that down through the centuries you have enlightened men with wisdom so that life could be saved and preserved. We do thank you for the wisdom and direction that you have given to our government in guiding us through this challenging period. May our residents have a spirit of cooperation regarding the vaccine and the other measures that have been put in place to protect and preserve life. We do thank you, O God, for the protection that you afforded us during this last hurricane, and we ask for your continued protection for the rest of the season. Grant wisdom and direction to our governor, our premier health minister. Father, please enable and enlighten all those you have placed in authority over us to govern the Cayman Islands. And may all of us be submissive to you and to your word, which you have given to guide us. And so, Father, please guide and direct in these press briefings. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. God bless you.
Our panelists today, His Excellency Governor Martin Roper, Premier the Honourable Wayne Panton, Minister for Health the Honourable Sabrina Turner, Minister for Tourism the Honourable Kenneth Bryan, Minister for Education the Honourable Juliana O'Connor-Connolly, and Dr. Colin Charles. In studio with us are the medical officer of health, members of the media, invited guests, as well as our sign language interpreter, Miss Carolyn Powell. We go first to our Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Donna, and let me extend a very warm welcome to everyone who is present, members of the press, and those who are viewing and listening to this press briefing. Thank you very much for your interest. And good afternoon. I want to speak to you today, not only as Premier of the country, but as a son of the soil, who is deeply concerned about our people, about our country, and about all those who call these shores home. Frankly, I am deeply concerned as to the potential unnecessary loss of life because some in our community still refuse to take the vaccination, which remains one of the most effective tools we have to protect ourselves from the ill effects of the virus, which causes the disease known as COVID-19. I do understand that there is a segment of our community that cannot take the vaccine for a variety of reasons, even religious ones. But for the rest, there is not really any excuse. I want to recognize that we accept that our people have the right to have the views that they have. We don't want to say that we're going to disrespect those views. And one thing is for certain, we don't want to be in a position where we want this issue to be divisive for the country. But I want to say that notwithstanding that, we are going to, as a government, continue to promote the uptake of the vaccine. And as people continue to resist vaccination, I want to say that you are putting yourselves, your families, your neighbors, and indeed our entire country at risk. And I don't think that is right. I've heard a myriad of excuses from people who do not want to take the vaccine, that there are long-term effects, that the vaccine contains computer chips, that people have died, that people have had to have organ transplants, emergency surgery. Ladies and gentlemen, all of these are myths and lies designed to scare you and carry out an anti-vaccination agenda. If any of that was true, the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, would not have given the Pfizer vaccination full approval on Monday. That's the safe and highly effective vaccine that the United Kingdom has provided to us for free, and that our Health Services Administration has been administering since January. Another excuse that I've heard for not taking the vaccine is that government is waffling, that it is not giving a solid date as to when the borders will reopen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think most people should be familiar with our reopening plan, and the relevant date there is October 14th. That is the date that this government has set to remove all quarantine requirements, essentially reopening our borders. That is what I call our C day, the day or the date that the risk that COVID will become a reality in our country significantly ratchets up. That is the date that we stop relying on our very effective and protective testing and quarantine mechanisms and start relying on the vaccine to keep us safe from serious illness and death. That is the date that those of you who have not been vaccinated will be at an exponentially increasing risk of being in close contact with someone who is carrying COVID. That is the date when there will be the chance that you cross paths with that COVID-carrying visitor at the supermarket, the liquor store, the hardware store, or any restaurant or church, anywhere really. And that you may become infected and, God forbid, take the virus home to your unvaccinated children, grandchildren, at-risk parents, or grandparents. Do you really want to be perceived as being that irresponsible? COVID, ladies and gentlemen, is real, and it is going to be very likely to be present when we open our borders. And we have to understand that community transmission of COVID, which we have been able to successfully limit with the measures we have had in place, will be a much greater possibility. In relation to the vaccine, is it safe? Undoubtedly, yes. Is it guaranteed to prevent infection? No. Is it the best possible protection that we have available to us? Absolutely. So we have the opportunity now to protect ourselves, our families, and our community. What I'm asking you to do, again, as your premier and a son of the soil who loves his people, his country, and those who call Cayman home, is to get vaccinated. We plan to move the requirement for the 80% vaccination target from the 9th of September to the 14th of October. As of today, about 72% of our estimated population of 71,106 people have received their first jab, and about 69% have had both doses. I know that there has been some confusion about population statistics. So using the population figure of 65,786 released by the Economics and Statistics Office last week, close to 78% have received the first shot, and about 75% have received the second. Let me just say, ladies and gentlemen, in relation to that, with the Delta variant, this notion of a target for vaccination is becoming more and more difficult to maintain. It is something that we really need to be seeking to maximize in terms of vaccine distribution and take-up, because the Delta variant, as has been indicated fairly recently, has a very high rate of contagion. Its transmissibility is very similar to measles or chickenpox, and we need to have as many people as possible vaccinated. This is a very serious situation that the world is facing. There is the potential for even greater variants with worse transmissibility potential. But this one in particular is something that we have to deal with, and we have to recognize is a very significant risk for us. We will still go into phase 3 of our reopening on the 9th of September, accepting all fully vaccinated visitors who will still have to quarantine during this slow season. This will help government and the tourism sector develop capacity for dealing with larger volumes of travelers in preparation for high season. But if we want to stick to the 14th of October date of opening with no quarantine, we need to be ready to accept visitors, ready to expect COVID, and ready to manage it safely. Remember that we have had no community spread of the virus for well over a year. So we will not have much natural immunity from infections, making vaccinations all the more crucial. In my heart of hearts, all isn't doom and gloom yet. We still have time. I believe we can work together to get the 80% vaccination ratio by October, or hopefully even exceed it. The target that we have set, we believe, based on the scientific evidence, will help us have the best chance of limiting community transmission and the most devastating impacts of COVID. I calculate, working backwards from the 14th of October, that those who have not yet been vaccinated need to get their first shot by no later than the 9th of September. That will give them 5 weeks to reach the That will give us, 5 weeks to reach the 80% vaccination rate before we remove the quarantine requirements. You will see on your screen a graphic which indicates the 9th of September date being the first date for the jab, the 30th of September being the date for the second, and then the 14th of October, all of which will take 5 weeks. Moving the 80% requirement to October has been provisionally approved by government, and we will finalize the changes to the reopening plan in Cabinet subsequently. But I want to emphasize that you can and should still take the vaccine anytime between today and the 9th of September. People ask for a go-to date or a target date. Well, that's it. That's it. October 14th is the target date that we are going to effectively be dropping the quarantine, and that's when the risk that we have infected people in the country and the possibility of COVID returning to Cayman in place. This afternoon, you will hear from other ministers about the sort of nuts and bolts of reopening. But I want to appeal to you as a person who cares and a man who cares deeply about our people, our country, and our residents. Last week, a college roommate of a friend of mine died from COVID because he didn't take the vaccination in the US. He couldn't get vaccinated because of underlying medical conditions. But his family did take the vaccine because they didn't want to expose him to the virus. Despite all their precautions, he caught it. He could have picked it up at the grocery store, at the pharmacy, any restaurant, or wherever he traveled in his hometown, because someone he came into contact with had the virus. Following his funeral, his daughter posted the following on Facebook. After COVID-19 killed my dad, I felt so much anger. To those with healthy immune systems that didn't get vaccinated, you make me sick. Every time I see people running around Madison indoors without masks, I want to scream. People with hematologic issues can't get vaccinated. Young children can't get vaccinated. For all these people who claim to care about the sanctity of life, you sure have a funny way of showing it. I got the vaccine to protect myself, my family, and my community from the destruction of this virus. I didn't wish this level of grief upon anyone else. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't honestly want to see a post like that from anyone in Cayman. While I don't know the daughter who made the post, I know my friend who lost someone to the virus. And I know our heart hurts. I don't want our hearts to be hurting. I don't want to go to the funeral of anyone who has died because of COVID. But we know we're taking risks with the opening of our borders. Government continues to make decisions based on the best available information and scientific evidence and advice. But we are also cognizant that we simply cannot afford to keep our borders closed indefinitely. Like so many things in life, we're trying to strike the right balance. Being aware of the risks that we're taking with the decisions that we're making, but also making sure that we are doing everything we can to limit and mitigate those risks and their potential impacts. I think, ladies and gentlemen, we only need to look at our fellow British Overseas Territory, the BVI, as an example of how things can go wrong and why we need to be very careful and we need to maximize the tools the employment of the tools that we have available to us, which is maximizing the uptake of the vaccine. From the start of COVID until I think about June or the end of June or the beginning of July, they had one COVID death. Since then, they have had 36 COVID deaths. So when the Premier in BVI says that he has suffered immeasurable grief because so many of the people that died he knew personally, I certainly don't envy him in his position, and I don't want to be in that situation. So we need to be extremely careful and manage this as best as we can, and utilize the tools that are available to us, which is getting as much people vaccinated who are eligible to as possible. We have just come through a rough time with the passage of Tropical Storm Grace / Hurricane Grace. Some will argue that it was definitely hurricane force winds. I'm not going to argue about that. But just as after Ivan and Paloma, we have pulled together and we've cleaned up our yards and are working and cleaning up our yards in our communities. We're restoring our islands together. And it is what we do when we're faced with a disaster. It's now time for us to pull together because we're getting to that point where we need to stop another impending possible disaster by getting vaccinated, encouraging our family and friends to get vaccinated, to utilize the one tool that we know is available to us. We are a people known for caring for each other. In times past, our forefathers and mothers survived by working together side by side and sharing their provisions. We still do it to some extent. After the passage of grace, we shared the breadfruits, the mangoes and pears that had been blown to the ground, often swapping one for the other or just taking our bounty to friends, family, and neighbors. I'm asking that we show that care for each other now by getting vaccinated. Please, ladies and gentlemen, stop listening to the false news, the propaganda of those who perhaps wish you ill will or whatever their particular agenda is. Certainly not something that seems constructive at the end of the day. We have 8,765 doses of the vaccine that are set to expire at the end of October. There are 2,000 people left to take their second shot, so that leaves us a little more than 6,000 doses for first jabs, or 3,000 persons if we were to have both, have them all double jabbed. If the United Kingdom sees that we have used the vaccine they have given us for free, they will, I'm sure, and the governor can confirm, hopefully, supply more for additional injections and eventual boosters. If we don't use our vaccine supply, it is not impossible that there may be a reconsideration of that generosity. If that occurs, that will mean that you may have to pay for your own vaccination if, for example, private businesses consider a move to ensure that their employees and vendors delivering their goods are vaccinated, and also as government insists that work permit holders and those who renew work permits are fully vaccinated before working on our shores. It is to those businesses that I turn my attention. We strongly encourage the private sector to take all appropriate steps to urge their staff to become fully vaccinated. And we fully support such an approach by the private sector. I appreciate those that have educated their staff and supported and encouraged them to get vaccinated. Now that the Pfizer vaccine has been given FDA approval, I suspect there'll be a renewed appreciation for the need to protect staff and vendors that supply your goods and services in your physical premises. And I, again, welcome and support the actions many of you propose to protect your staff and your businesses. I'm also asking everyone in the private sector to help us appeal to get the majority of our people and residents vaccinated before the 14th of October. Use your channels, you get creative, use whatever measures you have available and communication measures you have available to you, because government cannot do it alone. I am, ladies and gentlemen, I should say, puzzled and perplexed as to why people who are intelligent and caring and full of common sense would rely on or believe so much of the misinformation on social media and platforms like YouTube, rather than taking the advice of our own doctors who specialize in public health or the advice of their private doctors. I understand if you're afraid, but I would suggest that you do not need to be. We've had in excess of 51,000 people in Cayman take the vaccine, including 100% of our elected government. And we have had no person admitted to hospital for any side effects. Yes, like any other vaccine and most medicines, there are potential side effects. These can include pain, redness, and swelling at the injection site, fatigue, headache, muscle pain, joint pain, chills, and fever. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that you won't have any side effects. That would be a lie. I can tell you personally, I experienced a few hours of fatigue and low-grade fever after my second shot. Although many people haven't experienced any of those issues. If you do experience side effects, Tylenol or a similar over-the-counter analgesic and rest will help. Many side effects are gone within 24 hours. Pfizer and the FDA are aware of the side effects, but the FDA also approves the efficacy of the vaccine. When COVID-19 broke out last year, the favorite mantra across the globe was that we were in this together. We now need to come together again and get vaccinated to survive together as a people. If we don't, I am afraid the consequences may be dire, and like our friends in the BVI, we may have unnecessary funerals and possibly an overwhelming of our healthcare system. We're seeing this happen around the world in places where the vaccine uptake has been low. I want to thank everyone who has already done the right thing and taken their COVID vaccination. Thank you for playing your part in protecting our community. For those of you who can get vaccinated but have not yet done so, I implore you to not let the opportunity pass to protect yourself, your family, your friends, and your community. Do not let that opportunity pass you by. Step up, get the vaccine, and help give the Cayman Islands the best chance for a safe reopening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Premier Panton. We now go to His Excellency.
Thank you very much, Donna, and good afternoon, everybody. Really nice to be with you all again. I do want to acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Governor, who is with us as well, who's chairing the Programme Board, which is doing a huge amount of work behind the scenes, managing the civil service response to this pandemic. I just want to say to start with, we're 4 months into the new government, so I've been working incredibly closely with Premier Panton. We've established a really strong and close relationship, and I've established equally good relationships with ministers and parliamentary secretaries and his team. And I know from all the discussions internally just how much care, attention and effort is being placed on handling this pandemic by the government. And I've seen that up hand and want to underline it. And it's a heavy burden. It's a heavy burden of responsibility to be managing this really difficult, complex reopening plan. And I know the whole community will join me in supporting them and thanking them as they move forward and take some decisions. And just to first pick up on the point about vaccines, and the Premier has covered it, we do have sufficient left to vaccinate about 3,000 new people. And if we can use those, we will be able to get more vaccines in there is a weekly BA flight in September, so I don't envisage any problem in getting more in. But if we cannot use those vaccines, and we of course we can't send them anywhere else because of the cold storage, we can't send them to another country. So if we don't use them, they would be wasted. My message to Cayman, please, Cayman, let us not be in that position. Let us not waste this incredibly precious resource, which people around the world are desperate to get their hands on. So I really do hope that we see a significant uptake in people coming forward for this vaccine. And I know the Premier shares that view as well. So the dates for the next 2 phases of our border reopening are approaching, as the Premier has outlined, 9 September and 14 October. And I strongly support this renewed effort to get more people to come forward to take the vaccine. We are doing extremely well internationally. We're up there amongst the top 6 or 7 countries in the world for vaccine uptake. But because of Delta, it's so incredibly infectious. As the Premier has said, we need to go further so we can have some confidence that our level of vaccination rates will protect us. But to have even more confidence, we need more people to get the vaccine. And put simply, the more people we vaccinate, the more lives we will save. So I fully support what the Premier has just said about having those very clear dates in mind. But no matter how slowly and carefully we reopen our borders, it is a simple fact that COVID will return to our islands. New Zealand is showing that very clearly now. But government here has a reopening plan which will allow us to move forward carefully and cautiously manage risks as we go forward. And I agree that we can't stay locked up forever. Too many people out there are hurting. And the vaccine is the best tool we have to protect our community. But there are other measures we can also put in place around masks, social distancing, and more testing to protect the community as we move forward. And we do know that the Pfizer vaccine, probably one of the most effective vaccines there is out there, 90% effective in preventing hospitalizations. And if you can still contract the virus if vaccinated, but it's much less likely that you will become seriously ill or die. But if you are unvaccinated, for many people, your natural immunity will not be enough to fight off this nasty virus. The vaccine boosts your immunity and helps your body fight it if you are infected. And I won't say more on the sort of FDA's decision for full approval. Clearly a very welcome step, and I hope it provides confidence and reassurance for more people here to come forward and get the vaccine. And just a word to support what the Premier said on side effects. We've looked at some data from the UK, which I think is really powerful. Very few people in the UK experience side effects from having the vaccine. Only between 3 and 7 people in every 1,000 people have reported any side effects. And the vast majority are the sort of soreness in your arm, very sort of minor symptoms. So again, you look around the world now, 5 billion doses of this vaccine have been given out. So this is a safe, effective vaccine. So please do get it. I just want to say a brief word on boosters. So it's now almost 8 months since vaccine rollout started in Cayman. I was one of the first back in on January the 7th to get the vaccine. And I know that many people who got the vaccine early will be wondering if and when they might need a booster shot. Now, the UK's Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency has been assessing evidence for boosters and the best vaccine to use for boosters. We expect it to report in about 10 days. The UK government will use that report to finalise its plans for a booster rollout. It may initially only be for highly vulnerable groups, but we can expect whatever programme is rolled out in the UK to be put in place also for Cayman. Now, immunity does seem to wane somewhat with the Pfizer vaccine, which appears to increase the risk of mild COVID infection in those vaccinated. But there is no evidence that the waning immunity causes serious illness or death. And I think if there was evidence, the UK would be moving much faster to a rollout of boosters than it is. So I think we can take comfort from that. So the Pfizer vaccine is still extremely effective at preventing serious illness and death, even for those who got it at the very beginning of our programme. So there's no need to be overly concerned about boosters, and we are getting some concerns expressed by members of the public. We still have time, and I do expect us to be part of a booster rollout in September, which will be well before the key date that the Premier has highlighted of 14 October. So just to conclude, we are now on a path to reopen the border, and we have clear timelines and dates and clear policies to manage the risks as we move forward. There's a major prize within our grasp to be able to open up without having to go back into lockdown, as so many other countries have had to do. And because our vaccine uptake is already high and could go higher, that prize really is within our grasp if the community rallies round and takes the vaccine. So please do come forward and take it when you can. Thank you.
Minister of Health.
Good evening, and thank you, Donna. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Excuse my voice, out working, and no thanks to Grace. You've been aware in a press release released by the Ministry of Health and Wellness earlier this week, and you've heard it here before, our Premier and the Deputy and the Governor, of the United States Food and Drug Administration, that's FDA approval, of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Now, this is further good news, as this approval fully demonstrates the confidence of the FDA in the high standards for safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing quality of this vaccine that we've been so blessed to have from the get-go. I do hope that with this full FDA approval, that this will reinforce the public's confidence in the safety, efficacy of the vaccine for you, our Cayman Islands, as a whole. Now, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, this is proven to continue to provide excellent protection against serious illness and death. And if we look back pretty much a year ago, and ever would have thought that we would have a vaccine that does this, we would have been more relieved and thankful. Now that we have such vaccines that are available, I would like to really implore each and every one of us to take advantage of this protection, as we even consider, and given here today for the 14th of October, begin to reopen our borders. Now, it is understood that vaccines are the best way of dealing with this pandemic, and definitely with this virus. And we know that in time, the effects may wane, but at the moment, we're beginning to see where its protection is against the infection, but against serious illnesses and death remains a huge threat. So also here today with us, at the end of this briefing, should there be any questions, we have public health officials who will be better able to speak to some of the effects which persons have voiced after taking the vaccine. However, I have been reliably informed that we have not had any cases where there has been any admissions to the hospital or deaths as a result of vaccine, bearing in mind the difficulty of proving cause and effect. Now, we're eagerly also awaiting the release of key studies, as so stated here by Our Excellency the Governor, how to best use boosters before this technical advice can be shared. But as we've been said before, we have been reassured by the Foreign and Commonwealth and the Development Office that we will be able to access boosters appropriately for those to determine to be the most groups that will be affected by this. Again, I would like to reiterate that our best protection as a community as a whole for all of those who are eligible in their age groups to take up the vaccine, go and get vaccinated. This is the best defense that you have, as we are so able now to give a definitive date, which for many weeks, that's what the public has been asking. When is the opening date? I therefore urge everyone to come forward and be vaccinated against the COVID-19. Also today, I want to remind persons that you can go and sign up to access their COVID-19 vaccination records digitally on the My HSA Patient portal. This will allow persons to have access to their immunization records on a secure platform from anywhere with internet connection. All you have to do is to visit the HSA website on hsa.ky for more information on how you can sign up. I would like to also stress that in our efforts in increasing the access of vaccines, we as a government have decided earlier this morning is that we're going to be able to offer it in our various constituency offices throughout the islands, where you get your wellness checks and you'll have access to the vaccines. This Thursday is slated for the Savannah Newlands area from 4 to 7. And next on the 2nd, we'll be back in the Prospect at 33 Marina Drive, also from 4 to 7. And we also are planning, and more details to this regard will be forthcoming, a vaccine that is we're going to take a bus and go throughout the islands. We're going to do a road show starting from West Bay, and we're going to even take it over there to the sister island, Cayman Brac, where we start in the evenings with a bus, work with the elected officials for each constituency, and each day we will be coming to your area, and we'll be using all social media platforms in our efforts to make this possible. I want to thank the HSA staff, public health officials for making this event possible, and that will kick off for the week of the 6th of September. Finally, I want to thank and encourage our community to continue to work together to keep our island safe. None of this success is possible without you. The health and safety of our island remain the top priority for our government. And I can assure you, as Minister of Health and Wellness, we will do everything in our power to put people's safety first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Turner. We now go to the Minister for Tourism, the Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Thank you, Donna, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today to hear the latest news and information in respect to our reopening plans and our vaccine uptake. Today I'll be providing you with some tourism updates related to the new stipend applications and the ongoing registration at work. That's work with a C. But I first would like to share some relevant COVID-related information with you, as my colleagues and the Honourable Governor has done. Many of you may be following the international news broadcasts and will be aware of the continued rise of COVID infections rates across the world, particularly those in Florida, our closest U.S. hub, and Jamaica, our closest neighboring island. Florida is going through their third wave and have recorded 150,000 new positive cases just last week. Although Florida has a vaccination rate of 66%, reports from the Jackson Memorial Hospital indicate that 96% of their patients hospitalized are due to COVID are those who are unvaccinated. Again, I say 96% of them are unvaccinated. Last week, Florida recorded another 1,486 death fatalities due to COVID, bringing their total number of deaths to 42,252. Jamaica is also facing a third wave of infections and is currently enduring another series of lockdowns. This past Sunday, Jamaica recorded 879 new COVID infections, which is their highest daily total. They currently have over 550 people hospitalized and more than 1,400 people who have already died. According to their chief medical officer, the infection rate is soaring among persons 18 to 36, rising from 37% of the total cases in March and April to a whopping 43%. That's an increase by 6% over those months and in their current third wave. Just yesterday, the UK announced that they'll be placing Jamaica on their red list. This means that all travel from Jamaica to the UK will be banned. Only those who have the right to reside in the UK can return, but they must quarantine in a government-approved hotel for at least 11 days. The question is, why am I telling you this? Because Florida and Jamaica are two destinations in particular where most of our visitors travel through and where many of our residents travel to. As hard as it has been to keep our borders closed over the last 18 months, it has given us an opportunity to observe the experiences of others and to put the knowledge into practice so that we can avoid the situations that are happening in Florida and in Jamaica as they go through their waves. All around the region, countries are facing same outcomes and consequences, and consequently, the UK has also placed St. Lucia, Antigua, and Dominica on their red list. Judging by the scores in similar examples worldwide, the Cayman Islands would be wise to learn from what's going on around us. We should be resolved to doing everything that we can within our means to avoid following the same path. And we should trust the guidance of our medical professionals and the Minister for Health and Wellness. Turning our attention now to the reopening of our borders, the Ministry and Department of Tourism continue to work hard in preparing for Phase 3 and the government's reopening plan. As a reminder, and as you heard before, Phase 3 begins on the 15th, 15 days from today, the 9th of September, and paves the way for a limited introduction to tourism. Apologies. On the other hand, I'm very pleased that we have been safely reached this point, and I, like everyone in the tourism industry, are looking forward to receiving tourists back to our shores. But on the other hand, I'm deeply concerned by the reluctance of some within our community to protect themselves from the virus and its variants. This is troubling to me because the fact is we cannot stop COVID from entering our shores one day in the future once we reopen our borders. And I'm not sure if everyone fully understands this. I am particularly concerned for many people in the tourism industry because tourism workers and frontline staff have a lot more contact with visitors on a regular basis. This is why it is so important for them to be vaccinated, because if they're not, they're basically putting their lives and the lives of their people and loved ones at risk. There's no need to put our people's lives at risk. I am therefore appealing once again to all of our partners, stakeholders, and workers within the tourism industry. Please get vaccinated. Protect yourselves, your colleagues, and our industry, so together we can keep our country from avoiding the same kind of infection rates and tragic loss to life that we are witnessing across the world. Turning our attention now to the stipend payments. The Ministry of Tourism recently reopened the stipend registration period to give tourism workers the chance to submit an application if they have not done so already. A total of 442 new applications were received. The stipend is intended to provide financial relief to workers, tourism workers, and I'm keen to ensure that persons who qualify and are in need of this support have the opportunity to receive it. But before the applications can be approved, the information provided to the ministry has to be verified. We need to ensure that the applicants meet the specific criteria, i.e., that they are Caymanian or permanent resident or married to a Caymanian, and that they were working within the tourism sector at the time the pandemic began. With 442 new applications in the pipeline, the verification process is unfortunately taking a little while longer than anticipated for a number of reasons. My staff are working diligently on it and are expected to complete it by mid-September. The payments to all newly approved applicants will be backdated to cover the 3-month period from July to September 2021 and will be paid on a monthly basis moving forward. I'm very aware that our tourism workers depend on the stipend support, and I would like to assure them and all the new applicants who will receive approval that we're doing all that we can to issue the payments as soon as possible. In the meantime, I sincerely apologize for the delay and want to publicly thank all of the new applicants for their patience. I'm asking you to please bear with us just a little while longer. Most importantly, if you received an email or a voicemail from the Department of Tourism, please be sure to respond, as it will also help us to speed up the verification process. Still on the subject of tourism workers, as the Minister of Tourism, one of my top priorities is to ensure that Caymanians are given the necessary priority, training, and opportunity to take up the suitable roles within the tourism product. To achieve that objective, it is absolutely vital that we have the relevant data to support and inform our decision-making. I therefore would like to remind and encourage all displaced tourism workers who have not already registered with Work with a C to please do so before the deadline ends on Tuesday, the 31st of this month. To date, a total of 1,712 persons have registered, not including the 442 new applicants for stipends. And of these, 473 have previously been registered with Work. 641 have confirmed that they would like assistance to find work, and 598 people have stated that they do not require any assistance to secure work, most likely be an entrepreneur who has their own business. The data tells us that there are still a lot of people, 1,075 persons, who have not yet registered. I'll say that again, 1,075 persons who have not yet registered. I don't know what the reason is, but you should be registered by the end of this month. If anyone needs any help with the registration process, the representatives of Work will be at the Westin Hotel Galleon Ballroom tomorrow, Thursday, the 26th of August, from 1 to 5 p.m., and on Friday, the 27th of August, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. You will need to bring your government-issued ID, a resume, and proof of your immigration status. to find out more about about our other sessions during the month of September, or to contact work directly, you can call 945-9672 or visit their website at work.gov.ky. My final update has to do with the return of our commercial air services. After 18 months of international commercial flights to our islands, after 18 months without international commercial flights to our islands, the Ministry and the Department of Tourism is in discussions with airline partners to prepare the return to our lovely country. We are currently working in collaborations with the Airport Authority and other relevant entities to safely schedule and manage the resumption of commercial air services to our destination. To date, aside from Cayman Airways, we have 5 major international airlines have confirmed that they will resume air service to Cayman, with more to come. This is very encouraging, and talks are ongoing regarding specific dates that commercial services will return. I will provide further updates when the schedule has been finalized. The resumption of commercial flights is exciting news that signals the restart of our tourism and the return to normalcy within our industry. More importantly, the return of our tourism will bring jobs and opportunities back to thousands of workers who have patiently waited a long time for this to come. The Ministry and the Department of Tourism are engaged in a variety of activities to ensure that the phased border opening takes place safely, smoothly, efficiently as possible. I look forward to sharing more details with the public as soon as I can confirm them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Bryan. We now go to the Honourable Minister for Education, Ms. Juliana O'Connor-Connolly.
Thank you, Donna, and good afternoon to all. I perhaps want to commence my remarks by referring to a post that was quoted by my good friend, the Honourable Alex Boyd, Knight of Dominica. And she said as follows: "My people, discernment comes when one realizes that, first of all, there is a difference between fact and opinion. And secondly, one cannot have an opinion on whether a fact is true or false. It is a fact that the Honourable Premier came to my office yesterday and asked if I would come and lend my voice, whatever contribution that can make, to the nation to try to encourage all of our people to see the significance and the importance of becoming vaccinated. It is a fact that I was a late convert and that I too had my concerns about the side effects and my own medical issues. It is a fact that I consulted my 3 medical doctors, one of whom is here today, and I shan't call his name, and they all gave me the green light to go ahead. In fact, went beyond that and encouraged me to go. It is a fact that that was not sufficient, because I am an avid reader, as most people probably realize by now, and so I too surfed the internet, the social media, but I always made an attempt to apply what I termed as the peeling away concept, and for you to better perhaps wrap your minds around that. Just conceptualize in your mind an orange, and the skin being what you probably see on just your regular social media. Well, I went beyond that. I went into the core to try to find the seeds of the fact, so that I would have that opportunity from my own personal perspective to dissect and bisect, and through the process of analytical thinking with whatever intellectual capacity that the Lord bestowed upon me, and from speaking to others, to see what was in the best interest. So it is a fact that, yes, even persons who have degrees, sometimes more than one, takes time to exercise their constitutional right of what is best. It is my opinion that it should not have taken me 18 months. But I'm comforted that after today, there won't be any more 18-month plus, that persons would have listened, that persons would have received with an element of gratitude that the government, the entire government, inclusive of the opposition and the civil service, that our medical personnel, that all and sundry who care and love this country and who care and love these people will now come to that juncture in your decision-making process that it's time for you, no one else. The responsibility lays firmly and securely and flatly at your feet to make that decision that now is the right time. Why now? Because we have heard so ably articulated and conveyed to our nation just now by the Honourable Premier and by the associated panelists that we have to reopen the country because we are a government that have said across all of the 19 constituencies of this jurisdiction that community builds country. We are hell-bent to ensure that the modus operandi is that we are going into our communities and we are going to spread the message. It is a fact when you have taken the first jab. It is also a fact when you've taken the second jab. And I can tell you that last Friday, I took my second jab. I took a bit of coaxing by the Premier. And it wasn't because I was afraid, as I said yesterday, because very few things make me afraid, perhaps only one God. But it was that human element. He did not have to, as I indicated. Yes, perhaps it would have been very helpful because he was, for the first time today, able to say that the entire elected government is now vaccinated. But that in itself would not have changed or resolved. I had to make that decision myself. But it is a fact that after all of the facts have been duly and properly and adequately disseminated to our various constituencies, if we extend that hand of care, not just by putting it on a Facebook post or putting nice PR out, yes, that is auxiliary and it will help. But when he came after a cabinet meeting in this same building, when all of our colleagues had left, and we sat down and got face-to-face and eyeball to eyeball, which I quite adhere to the concept because it does reveal what's in the heart. And he said, you know, I care about you. I knew that, otherwise he probably would not have invited a non-starter from another party into his government. But he did. And he continued to share personal, family situations, as we both, even until today, have members of our family who have not yet chosen to be vaccinated. But one thing I can say, it is a fact that although my journey took me 18 plus months to make that final step, I never once discouraged any member of my family not to get vaccinated. And so it is a fact that if we are going to make this upward trajectory to 80% and or beyond, we ourselves who have now been vaccinated take it upon ourselves to become true mankind ambassadors and go to everyone we meet. And I like to sometimes convey that everyone in the concept of the Donahue and Stevenson case where Lord Stevenson said, who is my neighbor? And in fact, he went on to say in that historic case, my neighbor is everyone I come in contact with. So what that does, it puts the onus upon you and I to remove those fences, whether it was social or psychological or financial, or you just didn't like them because their last name or because they came from Philippines or Jamaica. They're human beings. Some of us have the privilege of calling Cayman our domicile of origin because we were actually born here and had generations of parents that gave us that privilege. But equally, we have persons among us who have chosen this domicile as their domicile of choice. So out of many, as our Jamaican neighbors say, we are one. This is indeed everybody's business. I know that we have data protection legislation, so even us as parliamentarians don't have access to have been vaccinated. But indeed, we are creative, otherwise we would not be on the global financial envy stage. We have made it successfully thus far, and we can still be that example to the rest of the world. When I look at the situation of Israel and the 70+ % of persons haven't been vaccinated, yes, they still are now looking at some 95% that are contracting COVID. But the fact is, I have not yet found, and I stand to be corrected, anyone in Cayman who has died because of the vaccination. The fact is, the boundaries are going to open. The fact is, there'll be a new import, and it's called COVID. The fact is, COVID kills. The fact is, my very best friend, Ingrid, who worked as a civil servant on my beloved island of Cayman, retired, went to Jamaica, built a beautiful home at the very top of a mountain, and hardly had the time to enjoy her pension or her retirement when she took sick for another reason, traveled back to Cayman, because yes, we do have good medical services in Cayman, despite what some people say, and only to discover within days, I got the phone call, Juju, tell your aunt and your mother, don't play with COVID, go and get vaccinated. And I could hear the difference in her breathing on the WhatsApp message. The next call I got from her, I could definitely hear that Ingrid was in trouble. She asked me to pray for her. I called back and I couldn't get her, but I still prayed in a WhatsApp message and sent to Ingrid. That's the last communication I've had with Ingrid. And if you don't know the emotional turmoil that is, when I live just a matter of a short 5-minute drive to Georgetown, HSA, but yet I couldn't visit Ingrid. I could not be at Ingrid's bedside to hold her hand for her to safely go from this world to where time has no constraints. I could not even communicate to her. That is a fact. And unless we take this serious, Caymanians and residents alike, and discern between opinion and fact, the fact is that will not be the last best friend or family member. But we, especially as politicians, who are called upon to read obituaries and tribute, sometimes to finance funerals, the fact is we will be pulling out our black suits, our navy blue suits, or whatever color, and have that very dark, lonesome, painful, emotional ride. If we have that privilege, because she had to be cremated, and I was asked to read her obituary at Bodden's funeral home. So I can tell you what it is. I've walked those 1,000 miles. And so, Honorable Premier, I will be eternally grateful for you for whatever reason that inspired you that late afternoon to take a vested interest in me. So now it is my duty and my responsibility, even though I don't like this type of setting, and I'm quite a private person. It's not about me or my personal feelings. It's about this country I love, the people I love, my students, my teachers, my staff. Hence the reason I accepted the invitation, not in my constitutional capacity as Minister of Education, District Administration of Lands, but in my capacity as a human being and as a way to convey my gratitude for the time he took in me. I felt the least I could do was to come and lend support today. The story doesn't end there. Back in 1979, when Kay King, and some of you in this room might know who she is, the daughter of the late Reverend King, who did so very much from an infrastructural perspective on the island of Kimmanbrack. She crowned me in 1979 as a Miss Teen. She was the outgoing Miss Teen 1978. I got a message from her just about 3 or 4 days ago from Alabama, where she's a teacher, and she is now lying, fighting for her life from COVID. The fact is, COVID is real. The fact is, vaccination will not prevent you from getting it or being a carrier of it, but the fact is, unless proved otherwise, will prevent the severity of the disease, it will prevent the death, and it is totally unfair and ungratifying to our medical staff who has been as superheroes and on the front line protecting those. They have conveyed their scientific knowledge to us to the best of their abilities. It's up to us, Cayman. And by that, I mean everyone who lives and breathes and have their being here, go and get vaccinated so that we can post 100% of our people are vaccinated. And yes, COVID can come. The variants can mutate, but we would be as prepared as scientific knowledge gives us that preparation. We've done it before, and yes, we can do it yet again. That is a fact. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Connolly. We now go to Dr. Collins.
Your Excellency, distinguished panel of honorable ministers, I just first like to just take the moment to just thank our honorable Minister O'Connor for sharing her experience. I'm very moved by what you just said, by your experience, and it resonates very deeply with me. The realities of COVID extend and affect every facet of our life. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here to share my experience contracting the COVID virus and experiencing the horrors as well as the humanity of that journey. I'm grateful to be alive, to tell the tale. I'm grateful to breathe. Something as simple as a breath. So simple, so important, yet so precious. Like many things that are of high value and worthwhile, we don't fully appreciate it until it's gone. In March of this year, while contracting COVID, my breath was almost stolen by that virus. March of this year, I was finishing my final year of specialty training in Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica. And in March 14th, I visited family as I usually would. My little cousin, 14-year-old cousin in particular, who enjoys it when I visit at least once a week. And while I was there on the 14th of March, I started experiencing subtle symptoms, just a little stuffy nose. But things progressed very rapidly within the following 4 days. What started as a stuffy nose progressed to a productive cough. That progressed into generalized weakness and fatigue, muscle aches, and before you know it, I had a fever and had labored breathing. I went to the hospital for which I was working in the front lines of that hospital for the last year, over the last year, going through my usual protective routine of wearing the necessary PPE, and felt very comfortable and confident that whatever protective routine I had was sufficient and effective. I mean, by all accounts, it worked for at least a year. However, when I went to the hospital and got my COVID test done, which was an antigen test, it came back positive. And a PCR test was done, and I was sent home. That very evening, my breathing became so labored, I had to return to the hospital. I was admitted for 2 days. While there, I experienced symptoms of shortness of breath. My oxygen saturations fell as low as 78. My heart rate, I became tachycardic, increased. Symptom-wise, I was extremely weak. I had vomiting, and more importantly, my breathing just seemed to get worse. I was discharged after 2 days and sent home. And while at home, monitoring with strict instructions as to how to monitor my clinical signs and symptoms, I woke up in the middle of the night, out of a deep sleep, gasping for air. And this experience was very much a traumatic one because what it felt as if I was submerged in water. But I'm not. I'm very much awake. And it's just COVID disease, the effects of COVID disease, just ravaging my lungs. I was diagnosed with extensive lung disease. And I actually attempted to call the ambulance in a near syncopal state. I was unstable. My oxygen saturations had fallen very low. My heart rate was beating above 130s. And I called a Caymanian physician, a friend, Dr. Brandon Bernard. And in very short order, he actually came and picked me up and took me to the hospital and saved my life. He found me in an unstable state. And during the first week of being hospitalized, the major symptom was being unable to breathe. I required various types of supplemental assistance to breathe, to maintain adequate oxygen saturation levels. But in addition to struggling to breathe, I was so weak. The very first week I was in hospital, I was so weak, I couldn't even open my eyelids. I couldn't do anything for myself. I was completely dependent on others. I remember times being awake and just being too weak to open my eyelids, but I can hear what's going on around me. It was horrific. It was traumatic. After about a week, when my symptoms did not improve, there was a panic. There was a panic by loved ones who started a cascading event of my tribe and my loved ones. I got assistance from family friends who are physicians. I got assistance from the Cayman government. I got assistance from the relevant persons at the Health Services Authority. I got assistance from everywhere for those people who cared about me and wanted to make sure that I survived. And it was after receiving that help that things took a turn for me for the better. But as I became to clinically improve, I became aware of my surroundings. And while I'm aware of my surroundings, I'm taking note of it. I'm seeing the persons who are lying next to me in these wards. I'm seeing young men, just like myself, my age, my clinical presentation, getting the exact same institutional care as I was receiving, and dying, not making it. There's this one particular gentleman I will never forget. Was sent home after 2 days, just as I was. And while walking through the door of the hospital, he collapsed and coincidentally collapsed in front of the very same doctor who came and picked me up from home and took me to the hospital, Dr. Bernard. And unfortunately, this young man did not make it. I distinctly remember lying on the wards and hearing the persons lying next to me telling their wives, my age, that they loved them. Telling them to tell their daughters that they loved them. And 2 days later, they died, they didn't make it. And these are the realities of COVID. We have been so blessed to live on an island that has shown over this unprecedented time that we cherish the resource that's most precious to us, which is life itself. And so after receiving a lot of help from family and loved ones, eventually I was discharged home, and you would think that experience in itself was enough. No, that was just the beginning of the story. There was also the long road to recovery, the long-term effects of the virus, the burden of the disease that doesn't necessarily go away after a week, after a month, that can stand with us based on what my pulmonologist says, up to a year or even up to for an entire lifetime. It can change the very quality of your life itself. And so these are serious realities that I'm still dealing with. I still have to work and go through physiotherapy on my lungs and try to avoid long-term damage. I still have to work on my overall conditioning because initially I was not able to function in the same way that I would have before. I still have to work on other long-term symptoms that may not be as severe, but they still affect the quality of your life. And so through this experience, what have I learned? Well, I can tell you. I was actually scheduled to come home for the Pfizer vaccine 2 weeks prior to my admission in the hospital. It was my personal choice at the time that I preferred the Pfizer vaccine was readily available here. And knowing what I know now and going through the experience that I did, I would never have hesitated to do everything possible to protect myself. Going through severe symptoms of this virus, seeing so many people just like me die, they're not here, leaving behind their loved ones, it's not worth hesitation. It's not worth waiting. The second thing I think I've learned from this is not simply about ourselves. This is bigger than us. At the beginning of the story, I told you that I went to visit my cousin and my family. Well, that same cousin subsequently tested positive. Now, fortunately for her, she was asymptomatic. But we have no idea what her potential symptomatology could have been. I couldn't live with myself if she went through what I went through because of me, or worse. So this is not just simply about ourselves and our personal preference. We have to think about others. We have to think about our loved ones. So based on my experience, I encourage every last one, please speak to your physicians, get the relevant information, but do everything you can to protect yourself and your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charles. You have something to say? No? Okay, we'd like to open up the floor now to members of the media, beginning with Ralph from the Canadian Times.
Hey, good afternoon, Donna. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the panel. Thank you for your heartfelt presentations. The hard act to follow. Yes, I'm going to have just a few brief questions. I think Dr. Rodriguez is here, and I'll send all my questions to him if he doesn't mind. By the way, I have my two vaccinations, and I hope that we pass the 80%.
Thank you.
And Dr. Rodriguez, just can you briefly tell us what plans have you increased the preparations for the increase of cases that may follow the reopening? Is the staff staffed up? Do you have the PPEs and stuff that you should have? Because it is a fact that we will have additional cases when we open the borders. And so I just wanted to ask the question.
Thank you for the question. Yes, it is expected that we will have cases when we open the border and also community transmission. We do have all the necessary PPE and all the requirement equipment on island, not only at the HSA, but island-wide to face an increased number of cases of coronavirus on island. When it comes to management of these cases from a public health perspective, definitely we'll continue to do contact tracing that we were doing before, and we will continue to monitor these patients very closely, as we actually doing now. We're still having some positive cases now from travelers, but we continue to monitor these cases very closely on a day-by-day call, everyday call by public health. We'll continue to do that. So the island is prepared to face an increased number of cases in the Cayman Island once we open the border. That's what is expected. However, have been said many times today, if we continue with our good number, with vaccination number, we have the protection, and we are confident that we won't get an alarming number of cases, severe cases and death, like other countries are experiencing around the world.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, sir. I've noticed recently that we have over 800 people this week in isolation. Can you say whether they are isolating in their homes or what percentage are isolated in their homes or government facilities?
The majority of the persons that are isolation at present are isolating at home. We still have a percentage of these of travelers isolating at the different government facilities, but the great majority of them are isolating at home at this stage.
Okay, thank you, Doc. And Donna, my last question is for the Minister of Tourism, Mr. Brandt. We have been home for a number of months, having to travel, and residents of the Cayman Islands have always been traveling on a regular basis. Of course, with the borders being opened in a couple of weeks, what would be your recommendation to those of us who like to travel abroad?
Well, considering the fact that I haven't left in 2 years myself, it'd be kind of hard to tell somebody not to go anywhere. But if they can resist it for now, particularly because most of the jurisdictions like the United States are going through what they're going through. We would encourage persons to stay home. But obviously, if you have other matters you have to address, then so be it, because after September 9th, we go to your normal scheduled flights, so to speak, by those airlines that are coming. So there's no longer repatriation flights, so commercial flights are going to be open to whatever schedule that is agreed to by the airport's authority. So ultimately, nobody can stop you at that stage. But if you do travel, take every precaution you can possibly can. Carry your mask with you. Try to stay away from major crowds. Stay with people that you know, those who are safe. And make sure you're vaccinated before you go. That would be my only encouragement, to keep yourself safe at this point. But if you can, stay home, if you can handle the wait longer.
Yeah. Just one follow-up. In your conversation with the airlines, did they indicate that they would have mandatory requirements for vaccinated passengers?
No, we have not established that yet. I've been hearing some whispering. I do have a scheduled update next week, Monday. Unfortunately, Grace has caused some hurdles in the way of the scheduled meetings to know what's happening at the airport and the airline scheduling. So hopefully I can give more of an update to the public in short order. But I do suspect that may happen. Obviously, different countries have different regulations based on their constitutional rights and so forth. So it may vary from airline to airline.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Donna. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Ralph. I'd like to now call on Wendy from CNS.
Thank you, Donna. Hello, everyone. Can I speak to Dr. Williams first, please, if I may? Thank you. Can I just check with you? A lot of the tests that are coming back positive, we now are not testing people at the airport. So these people are presumably getting positive results after their first 5 days. Sorry, after their 5 days in isolation. So that's when we're getting all of these positive tests that are now coming.
But they're getting test positive after quarantine. But that can be on day 6, on day 11, or day
Right, sorry,
15.
yes, in some people. So what's that telling us about the situation? Are we going to reintroduce the testing at the airport at any point between now and 14th of October?
That's definitely a decision for the government to make. We are in discussion also on the program board or the possibility of testing on arrival, and we will send recommendation to government, and government will make a decision on that.
Also, do you have any figures that can tell us the percentage of people that are testing positive that have been vaccinated?
We have that information. I don't have it on top of my head, but I can share it with you.
Okay, that's great. Also, I don't know whether you can answer this, but it's just to try and counter the narrative, because it does seem to have taken hold on certain social media platforms, and it seems that there isn't a counter narrative coming from government, that our death rate has increased this year rapidly, and that's why these people are able to suggest that it is as a result of the vaccine. Are you able to say whether we have collected death rate figures this year that are in any way excessive compared to previous years?
Actually, I can tell you as a fact that we have that data, and the death rate so far this year is lower than in previous years.
Fantastic.
As a fact.
That's all I've got for you. I'll ask you. I'll send you an email for the percentage figures for the footnote this year. Okay, just a very few questions. Can you tell us what's happening about the legislation, Mr. Premier, regarding the compulsory mandatory vaccine for work permit holders?
Yes. Wendy, if you allow me a second, I want to thank His Excellency for being here. I want to thank my colleagues for being here. I want to thank the incredibly compelling, poignant stories that came from both our colleague, Minister Juliana O'Connor Connolly, and Dr. Charles. Very, very incredible, poignant stories, real-life examples of people, the level of engagement and the issues that are involved and the risks that are involved. So thank you very much. both of you. Appreciate it so much. On that point, on the draft legislation, we are working through that. I think I have what is probably a final draft, if not very close to it, and I'll be taking that. I'll be handing it over to my colleague, the Deputy Premier, who has responsibility for WRC, with a C, as my colleague says, to take forward through Cabinet and to have it tabled in the LA. I intend to exercise the special circumstances or exceptional circumstances provision of the Constitution to provide shorter notice to allow it to be dealt with quickly.
No rough date?
Sometime, I suspect we'll have it tabled in the next within the next week or so, and then I haven't decided whether exactly how short the notice is going to be, but it is not a very significant bill, so I don't think it's going to require, and we've talked about this for some time now, so I don't think it's going to require a lot of consultation time.
Thank you. The only other thing really I wanted to talk about was the vaccine campaign and what more is going to happen with the addition of like the clinics that you're talking about having in constituencies and the vaccine bus. Is there anything else that you're planning to try and counter some of this anti-vaxxer narrative that is it's spreading on social media quite excessively now? It's coming out of a lot of places. It's on a lot of social media. It's even on the radio a lot, you know.
Well, speaking for myself, I intend to be very much engaged on all forms of media to try to address this issue. It is perplexing to me, as I mentioned earlier, that people that I regard as very capable and intelligent people can buy into some of this misinformation and let it influence their reasoning and their conclusions on whether they should take a vaccine or not. But I find that speaking to people, engaging with people, talking with them about the issue, confronting their their views on the issue, I think those are the ways that we can help to break through some of these resistant perspectives. So I feel we are, we're going. And I'm sure all of my colleagues will be doing the same. We'll be engaging fully on different forms of social media.
Is there any plans to extend the vaccine clinics? Because I know they've been closed on Mondays and they close early. Is there a plan to sort of open up the vaccine access more than we have already?
Yes, there are plans for that, and as we stated, we're extending it to our constituencies, and we're working closer with Public Health and HSA. Those will be coming out in the coming days. I know that we've seen a lot of resistance and hesitancy in those 16 to, let's say, 25, 30. And this does take a lot of work behind the scenes, understanding that we're dealing with our medical professionals and HSA's public health staff. But I'm hearing the outcry for more town hall meetings so persons can come and they can share and ask the questions to demystify a lot of it. And we are going to have to start using more of the younger persons out there that are very influential in social media in order to reach these younger persons here in Cayman. And I'm quite sure my colleague and I and the rest of the PAC government, Minister Bryan, may actually have some other tricks up his sleeves that is supported by all of us, but more engaging, coming down to their level, but using those influencers to really get to that specific target audience and age group, because that's where we're seeing the greatest hesitancy. And also there are a lot of our Caymanian older persons that are just now coming forward, and we're hoping by giving a definitive date of October that we will see an uptake and FDA approval as well. So in very short days, and I'll definitely keep all of you in the
and welcome to today's press briefing here at the CIG television studios. I'm Donna Bush, as always, glad that you could join us here on our various channels as well as on Radio Cayman. We begin with a prayer from Pastor Clayton Martin.
Father God, I do come to you in the name of Jesus Christ, my Savior and King. Lord God, this is your world. We are your people, the sheep of your pasture. Lord God, you are aware of all that goes on in our world. You know our challenges, the uncertainties, and you know our fears. You see how lives have been ravished, impacted negatively, devastated by this virus. We ask for your help. Likewise, we want to say thank you for helping us here in the Cayman Islands. Father God, our bodies are the temple of the Lord. You have given us men and women who have knowledge to develop the necessary vaccine to help us cope, to help us heal. You know our bodies. Many are struggling regarding the acceptance of this vaccine. Help them to be able to discern what to do at this particular time and what is needed. God, I pray for those in governance, our leaders, our health practitioners. Please give wisdom, guidance, and direction in decisions made and decisions that will be made. Lord God, you know what's needed for the good of people and the glory of God. Cause all to be done with you in mind, to the praise of your glory and for the good of humanity. Father, we thank you and we ask these favors in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and King. Amen.
And thank you very much, Pastor Martin. We now welcome our panelists, His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Martin Roper, Premier the Honourable Wayne Panton, Minister for Health, the Honourable Sabrina Turner, and Minister for Tourism, the Honourable Kenneth Bryan. In studio with us are the Deputy Governor, the Honourable Franz Manderson, the Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Samuel Williams Rodriguez, members of the media, senior civil servants, invited guests, and of course, the sign language interpreter, Ms. Carolyn Powell. First, we go to our Honourable Premier, Mr. Wayne Panton.
Thank you very much, Donna, and let me say thank you to all my colleagues and His Excellency for joining us this afternoon, and thank you to those members of the press who are present and other colleagues in the civil service, and certainly also those who are watching and listening to this press briefing. I have called today's press briefing to speak directly to you, our citizens and residents of the Cayman Islands, as well as those who eagerly want to visit our shores and share our vision of a safe, healthy, and prosperous future. It saddens me that our community is becoming increasingly divided. This is the exact opposite of the spirit that saw us successfully endure shelter-in-place orders and other public health measures for the greater part of 2020. I assure you that as the elected government, we have heard your voice notes, read your posts, your emails and messages, and carefully listened to your concerns. Some of you are worried about moving from our status quo to a new unknown. Many are worried about their children, elderly, and vulnerable loved ones. Some have used all their savings, cannot receive any more loans, and are on the verge of losing their businesses. Many are pro-vaccine, while others continue to express doubts. Some are worried about whether or when they will be able to return to work to provide for their families. Each story and concern is real, heartfelt, and deeply personal. Added to this angst, there looms an undercurrent of interference and competing agendas, which some will say is merely part of the political landscape. Nevertheless, we as a government are determined to not allow this added factor to detract or distract us from continuing to protect the interests of our people. I will say here that I appreciate the support of the opposition in our efforts to get people vaccinated. And the former Premier has now made it clear, abundantly clear, that he too supports vaccines. But with roses comes a little thorn. Just a few weeks ago, they were suggesting that government didn't have a plan in place and insisting that we throw open our borders on September 1st. I think in his most recent utterance, the former Premier has acknowledged the plan and is urging government now not to open on the 14th of October. I suspect the country is happy that we chose not to follow their advice as to when to open, and it seems now so is the former Premier. When the PAC government was given the privilege of forming the government in April, we accepted the solemn responsibility of developing and implementing a plan for safely reopening the Cayman Islands. We presented this plan to the country in early July, as we recognize that despite the success of the lockdowns and the closure of our borders, we could not remain in that state forever. That is neither possible nor sustainable. To date, we have successfully worked our way through initial phases of the plan. Tomorrow, September 9th, we move to phase 3, which entails allowing and quarantining all securely verified vaccinated visitors on island. After receiving their negative PCR test after quarantine, they'll be able to swim in our crystal clear waters, put their toes in our sand, and be the first tourists to enjoy Caymankind since March 2020. I will leave my colleague, the Minister of Tourism, to speak more in relation to phase 3 and what that involves. But that brings me to Monday's unsettling news of 24 new cases of COVID-19 here in Grand Cayman. These 24 cases involved 23 travelers and one household member who did not travel but quarantined with family members who traveled. 15 of the 24 were unvaccinated and 9 were vaccinated. Since February 2021, we have had 325 cases of COVID, 263 of which were unvaccinated, and only 62 of which were vaccinated. I hope these numbers will serve as an impetus for those who haven't yet been vaccinated to go and get vaccinated. I therefore want to remind everyone that if you or someone you know is not yet vaccinated, getting the first shot tomorrow on the 9th of September means you could be fully vaccinated by the time we are scheduled to enter phase 4 of the plan on the 14th of October. Those who get vaccinated will be going a long way in protecting themselves, everyone they know and love, the community, and our country. But you know, getting vaccinated goes a lot further than that. When the pandemic began, we immediately focused on protecting the most vulnerable, namely our senior citizens. We were all taken aback by the horrible way in which the first wave of COVID-19 seemingly swept away so many elderly people across the globe. Then our collective hearts surged with pride when our seniors set the example and bravely stepped forward to receive the first jab of the COVID-19 vaccine without hesitation. Thank you once again for doing the right thing and stepping up and blazing the path for the rest of us. Now, as our global battle with COVID-19 rages on, we must once again shift our focus and direct our attention to a new front. We have one main group that remains vulnerable and depending on us to serve as their collective shield by getting vaccinated. That is our children. Those who are younger than 12 cannot at this time take the vaccine. And it is our precious little ones who depend on us to make the right decision for their well-being that I'm most concerned about when we do stop enforcing quarantine. The bottom line is that, as always, we need to help protect those who cannot protect themselves. When the pandemic was first declared in 2020, the data and the medical evidence at the time showed us that